what's up? AND-TONIO here, and today I have a magical tip just for you. In this case, I'm going to be talking specifically about kids shows. This is something quite interesting because it's something that I have struggled with, because every time that I perform a kids show, I always like to be down, like in the floor where the kids are going to be seated, on chairs or on the floor, and I always like to see more or less how the kids are behaving. If they are talking a lot, if they are picking on each other, like they are not going to pay attention, they are going to keep playing between them. So when I go on stage, before everything I do, the first thing that I do is establish the rules of the show. And a lot of the times this happened to me in the past. I started the show and I realized halfway through the show that, oh my god, they are raising their hands to say something, to ask something, and I should have said something at the beginning of the show about this. So in a kids show, the way I understand a kids show, we want a controlled chaos, right? Because for kids to have a good time, we need a little bit of chaos, we need a little bit of craziness, right? But it must be controlled. Because if the teachers, if we are in a school or something like that, if the adults that are there see that it is 100% chaos and you are not under control, they are not going to book you again, because it is like, yeah, he's just doing crazy things, and if a kid wants to run away and come back like 5 minutes later, the kid is going to do it. So we don't want that. What is my first advice in order to find out the things that you should say at the beginning of the show? I'm going to share with you some things that throughout a lot of years of experience I kind of gather that are quite interesting to say at the beginning of the show with a kids show. How did I gather all of these ideas? Quite simple. Study your footage. Every show that I do, every show that I perform, I film it on video or I record audio, right? I do both of those things to study the show. And when I do a kids show, something that I am quite guilty is that I always start editing the video if I wanted to take out some kind of clip, because I tried a new trick and I don't have that trick filmed inside of my computer, and I start looking through the footage, and every time that I saw in the editing software, every time that I saw a kid misbehaving or kid screaming or a kid running around or anything like that, what I always did was like, I don't want to see this, because I felt awkward, I cringe, it's like, I don't want to see this, and I eliminate that clip, I eliminate that part of the video. That's the opposite of what you should do. You should study those clips and go like, okay, let's see what was this kid doing before this, right? Let's see how I address this. What occur at what point of the show, in which trick did this trick lose interest and start running around, all that stuff. You have to study bad behavior in your show if you want to solve it, if you want to put a solution to it. So that's the first thing that I have to tell you. The only way you can find out what you have to do, what you have to say at the beginning of your show to minimize, is impossible to have zero. Sometimes I had, but I think because I got very lucky with the kids. But if you want to minimize or get to zero misbehaving, you really need to study what happens in your show, at what point in your show, and then be prepared at the beginning of the show to stay clear what kids have to do. Okay? So I'm going to share with you some ideas of things that you can say at the beginning of the show to maximize entertainment and to maximize good behavior in a kids show. Okay, let's take a look at the first one. Okay, the first thing that I always say when I'm starting, when I'm at the beginning of the show, for a kids audience, is if you have any idea or something you want to tell me, okay, instead of raising your hand and anything like that, because we are not in a classroom, which is something that automatically kids understand, okay, this is not a classroom, we are here to have fun, this is not a classroom. If you want to tell me something or anything like that, please do it at the end of the show, right? And you may think, well, if I am performing a soccer trick or I am performing a trick of pointing or something like that, kids are not going to do it. Yes, they are going to do it. It's something inside of them like, turn around, yeah, it's there. They are going to do it, right? What I mean by if you have any idea or something you want to tell me, do it at the end of the show, is because a lot of the times, and this happens with younger kids and even older kids, you are performing a trick and you pull out, for example, I don't know, a bottle of ketchup, and I use this bottle of ketchup, and I don't know, maybe a couple of kids raise their hands and you say, oh, what happens? And they say to you, my grandma has a bottle of ketchup like that at her home. And you're like, that's very good. And what happens if you say something to that kid and you acknowledge that kid, oh, that's very good, automatically a lot of kids are going to raise their hands because they also want the magician talking to them. Like, I also have a bottle of ketchup like that in my house. And maybe some kids are lying. Some kids are saying, yeah, my grandmother too, because they also want to talk with the magician. So in these cases, it's quite important that you only talk with kids when the kids are saying things that are according to the part of the show that we are. If some kid says something, or you see that a kid is raising their hand at a moment where you don't need them to be saying something to you, it's very important to relax the kids. Like, okay, you can ask something to me later, don't worry, there is no problem, I will talk to you later. Because if they start saying things to you in the middle of the show, everyone is going to say something and you are going to lose a lot of time. Right? And I have no problem losing time if we are repeating a running gag or doing a joke over and over again, but I don't like losing time just talking with the kids, because maybe the adults that are there, they don't know that you found yourself in that situation. Maybe they think that there is like a portion of 3-4 minutes in your show where you simply talk to the kids. And I don't want that. I don't want adults thinking that my show is talking with the kids at some point, right? I want to have it full pack of comedy. So it is very important to control when kids ask questions and all that stuff. And very important, something that is quite important, I always tell kids that if they want to tell me something or anything like that, please raise your hands, right? Because if they start talking, it's something that I find myself totally amazed. They can start talking. I've been performing shows for more than 100 kids, and they talk to you all at the same time, and they don't even feel like there is a lot of us speaking and the magician cannot understand us. No, they talk to you, yeah, because I have a dog at my house, and the kid that is in the last row is like, yeah, because my grandmother is like, and they all talk at the same time, right? Thinking that I am understanding all of them. Maybe they think that I am a magician and I have this superpower to understand all of the individual conversations at the same time. So I said to them, okay, if you want to tell me something, you have to raise your hand, because I cannot see you if you are in the back, and we must talk one by one, okay? Very important. And the last thing I have to tell you, you don't know the amounts of time that saying to kids, okay, if you want to tell me something, if you want to say anything to me, please do it at the end of the show, okay? You don't know the amounts of time that has become the best part of the show. When kids come to you and they are like, you know what, Antonio, I didn't believe in magic, but you make me believe in magic. That's beautiful. And he's like, oh my God, and this kid is maybe like 7-8 years old. That's beautiful. Or I remember that I was doing a show way back when I didn't care about scripting, when I simply put some tricks in the case and I called it a show. I remember that I had a joke in the first tricks saying that I had no friends, right? I had no friends. And then I had another trick where I said, I showed this trick to my friends, blah, blah. And I remember a kid at the end of the show coming to me and saying, Antonio, do you have friends or not? Do you have friends? And I'm like, yeah, why? And he said, because you said at the beginning of the show that you didn't have friends, but then you said that you showed your trick to some of your friends and you explained what your friends thought, each of them, about the trick. And he's like, that's right. I have a routine where the hook or one of the jokes is that I don't have friends, and then I have another trick where I talk about the reaction that my friends have when they watch that trick. So it makes no sense to have those two routines in the same show. And this is something that a kid said to me. A kid said that to me. I could never thought about it. It's not that I thought about it and I went, it doesn't matter, I'm going to do both routines, I like them. No, it was a kid that said this to me. So I think that this is a major improvement in your kids show, the way you communicate with them. This is something very important you have to keep in mind. In a kids show, you have to communicate, because kids are going to communicate with you. So the thing that I'm trying to portray in this tip is that the communication must be clean. We don't need filler, we don't need to hear things that are not important to hear right now. We don't need all of them talking at the same time, right? And things that could be said at the end of the show is better if we say those things at the end of the show. Okay, so this is the first tip. Let's take a look at the next one. Okay, this is kind of a tip that I already established in the first one, and it is basically, if I ask for volunteers or if I ask any kind of question, I want hands up and in silence. And let me tell you something, if you are performing for big groups of kids, most likely you are not going to find this. They are going to put their hands up, and some of them are going to scream, me, I want to come out, me, please, me. You're going to find that. That's not bad. That's not bad, because all of the adults there know that if a kid really wants to go on stage, even though you tell them, if you want to come on stage, you must be quiet. They cannot help themselves. It's like over them. It's like, me. But that's good, because that way you can see the type of kid that you are going to bring on stage. If you need a more active kid, that's the type of kid that you should bring up. If you want a more relaxed kid that is going to obey what you do because you are going to do a trick that is a little bit more risky, for example, sponge balls, I would never ask on stage a kid that is me, I want to go on stage, me, because I am not sure if I put the sponge balls in that kid's hand, if that kid is going to have his hand closed around the sponge balls. Maybe he's going to go wow and throw the sponge balls all over, I don't know. But if I am performing, for example, some kind of comedy routine, for example, with a change bag, where the kids have to look inside the change bag and tell me the color of the silk, in that case, the kid is touching nothing. It's nothing that he has to touch, nothing that he has to handle. So if the kid sees the color of the handkerchief and he sees that the color change, he's going to react very big, because he is already reacting very big right before going on stage. So you have to keep in mind the kind of kid, and this is something that could be applied also for adults, the kind of spectator that you need, and study it every time that you ask a question, that you ask for a volunteer, right? And what I do is put your hands up and in silence, because if they put their hands up and they start me, you have like a chaos, a complete chaos in the audience. And even though adults know that this is how kids act, it is better if you can control it. If you can manage to have most of the kids in silence, smiling, and I always say it's very important to put your hands up and a very big smile. And I have like a comedy routine there about a kid that smiled too much, all that stuff. So like there, and that's very important, because if you are smiling, you cannot make noise. So it is like, and sometimes you find kids that turn into ventriloquist, like me, please me, right? Which is quite scary, and that's part more or less of my comedy routine. So that's basically it. Ask for kids in silence, smile, and if some kids are a little bit more energetic, that's good for certain routines, right? And this is basically a good way to establish that I need to see you, I don't want you bothering kids around you. And it is great. We must find this balance between craziness, show, comedy, laughter, and good behavior, right? Because we can have a good show if there is not craziness, but we cannot have a good show if there is not a little bit of obedience and behavior, right? It's impossible. Every one of us that perform kids shows sometimes in their life had a kids show where the kids were completely crazy, moving around, touching props, impossible to manage, and you don't want that, right? So it's very important to find that balance. Let's take a look at the next tip. Okay, this tip is quite important, and this is going to depend a lot on the material, the tricks that you do, but it is basically, don't stand up. Don't stand up by any means. You can stand up if I ask you to come with me on stage. But if you are clapping a lot, or laughing a lot, or you want to see something, like pull something out, and you think that you are not seeing very well because maybe I have it down, I don't have my arm stretched, I have it right here, don't stand up. I'm going to show it. I'm going to show it. If I have something hidden in my hands, don't stand up trying to see it. I'm going to show it at some point, right? It's very important to keep sitting down and don't bother the rest of the audience. Very important. Don't stand up and move around through your friends if you want to go somewhere. If you need to go to the bathroom or something like that, stand up and go behind the audience. Try to bother the least amount of people possible, right? And this is something very important. Don't touch or take anything that falls on the floor. And that's something that you have to keep in mind if you are doing some tricks like that. For example, in my silk routine, at the end of the silk fountain, confetti falls into the ground. In my rope routine, I do a version of Michael Finney rope routine. There are a lot of points where pieces of rope fall into the ground. For example, when I perform Balloon from Mark Genest, when the balloon pops, the bill falls into the ground. So if you are not performing on stage, if you are performing at ground level, a lot of the time kids are going to and trying to grab something, and it is very important to control those situations. And something very important to keep in mind, we are not going to blame it on the kids always. If you are doing a trick where something falls into the ground and you can change that, it is not 100% a necessity that that thing falls into the ground. You can change it, and that's something that I am working on. In a rope routine, if you have any idea about how we can change the knot, the pop knot, not to fall into the ground, I would love to hear that. But for example, I am searching for a handling to do balloon without the bill falling into the ground. First, because I don't like kids touching the bill, and second, because it is not that visual. The people that are far away, if you are not performing on stage, they cannot see the bill on the floor. They have to trust me and the spectator that is with me on stage. So I am trying to change some tricks to minimize the amount of things that fall into the ground, right? When you ask kids politely not to touch things at the beginning of the show, that's great. But you must know that this thing happens when you do certain tricks. So you establish it at the beginning of the show, right? Which is quite important. And most of the times in my routines, things fall into the floor at the end. So it is quite sad when you are receiving your applause. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. And suddenly 4 or 5 kids stand up and go there, right? And this is something that I didn't talk about, and it's quite interesting. It's like you have to make sure that most of the kids understood the rules. Why? Because if there is one kid that suddenly goes to grab something that is on the floor, if most of the kids remember, they are going to tell him, no, we cannot touch the things on the floor, right? But if most of the kids don't remember the rules, not only one is going to take something from the ground, most of them are going to follow that kid. It's like, oh my God, he's going to take a piece of rope. I want a piece of rope. He's going to take confetti. I want confetti. I don't know how it works in your country, but here in Spain, if you drop a handful of confetti to the ground, most kids want a piece of confetti. It's a piece of paper in the ground that is completely dirty, and they are going like this, like if it was snow, and grabbing a small handful of confetti. I don't see the point of it. But once you make it clear, it always works, okay? So that's important to keep it in mind. If you stand up, move behind the audience. If you want to go to the bathroom or anything like that, don't touch things on the floor, and don't move yourself up and down during the show, because people that is behind you are not going to see properly, okay? Let's take a look at the last tip. Okay, and this is the last tip, and it's one of the most important ones. You have to tell kids that if they are enjoying the show, they like what they see, they like what they hear, they need to laugh extremely hard and clap extremely hard. A lot of the times, and I have this problem too, I caught up myself giving like a punishment to kids right before the show. Don't do this and don't do that and don't talk and put your hands up. And it's like, yeah, it's very important to say those rules, but you have to tell those rules in a very jolly and charismatic way, right? So you make sure that you are not telling the kids you have to do those things or you're going to have a punishment. You have to do those things because if you do those things, the show is going to be better and you are going to have more fun. That's the way that it's supposed to be. And you cannot say only negative things, that don't do this, don't do that. You can and should and must also say things that are fun. Like if you like what you're seeing, clap. If you like what you're hearing, please laugh a lot. And this is something very important to do because we don't know if these kids that are very young maybe have ever been to a magical performance or any kind of live performance before in their lives, right? These kids probably have been in the cinema, they have seen YouTube clips and videos in the computer or play video games, but it's very important for them to know that I am here, and every time that I finish a trick or they see something great, I want them to clap and laugh, right? And this is basically why kids tend to clap and laugh less, not because they don't like the show, they love the show more than most adults. They clap and they laugh less because they don't have that social construct inside of them of this is a moment where we are supposed to clap, right? So this is great, we have to find that balance of comedy, rules, and suggestions, like clap, laugh, have a good time, okay? So guys, I think that this is everything for this video. I hope that you find this information useful. Please let me know in the comments below if you think that I missed some kind of important information. And as always, I will see you in a near future. Bye there!